Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss the major news right now, which is that thousands of school students are going to be unable to return to school next week, not because of personal circumstances or a deadly pandemic this time, but because the Tories are so unfit to run the country that school buildings are literally collapsing from neglect. I wonder if the same people who attacked homeschooling due to COVID will be attacking the Tories for not maintaining school buildings. I suspect not. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel. So the way things are working out, it looks like today is Tory Financial Incompetence Day. Unless something else crops up, all of my videos today, it's actually by pure coincidence, take the form of general financial mismanagement of the Tories in government. But before I explain exactly how this happened, let's go over what has happened. 157 schools, I think it is, have been told to close because crumbling concrete makes them unsafe. The first reports of this imminent catastrophe came from The Guardian a day or two ago, which reported that officials were making hurried calls to school leaders to draw up contingency plans. Now let's just step back a moment and consider what that means. School leaders in these schools have been saying for some time, years in fact, that their buildings were basically at the end of their life, they needed replacing. Sorry, the Department for Education will have said, we need the money to pay for Tory mansions and yachts, you see. Now that the buildings are actually collapsing, literally crumbling, the department is now telling those school leaders to come up with a plan to deal with it. Now, my response would be to say, hang on, my plan was to build new premises before the current ones collapsed. You said no. So you come up with a contingency to deal with it. I mean, I'm sure we've all been in a situation where a superior at work ignored you and you know, something, when their dumbassery ended up going wrong, just like you said it would, they expect you to fix the mess. Now, this is next level. And this has been a problem years in the making. The government knew that these particular types of buildings needed replacing years ago, specifically 3 prime ministers ago. So now we're in a situation where 150 odd schools have already they've already been told to close just before the new school year, like just before it, or 1 working day before it, with reports that more may be told to do so as well. Schools Minister Nick Gibbs said that the timing of the announcement was perfectly reasonable. He said, we took the decision as soon as the evidence emerged. No, mate, even the Daily Express, the most loyal of all the Tory client media, has on their front page that this was a problem known about 5 years ago. I've not actually read their article on it, in all honesty. I'm absolutely certain that somehow they blame Labour for a problem that occurs 8 years after they left office and turned catastrophic 13 years afterwards. But they are nonetheless putting on their front page the fact that this problem was known about in 2018. So now thousands of kids are going to have to return to remote learning, where teachers will have only just been finding out they're having to do this again, so very much on the spot. And it's not because of something outside of the government's control. COVID was outside the government. Well, the fact it got as bad as it was not. But COVID itself, I mean, that was just a public health necessity. This is pure Tory greed and incompetence. Purely that. Nothing unusual about these circumstances. This was always going to happen. It wasn't bad luck. So exactly how did this occur? Well, whenever I say that the Conservatives have broken literally everything in the country, I mean it. And I mean it literally. The reason this happened, it's the same reason that everything like this happens under the Tories. They have this pathological desire to cut public spending on anything which even looks like public service. And people go, well, why are the taxes so high if they don't like public spending? It's like, no. It's not that they don't like public spending. They just don't like public spending on public services. They don't mind public spending on private services because they make money out of that. Seriously, I'm beginning to think that MPs should not only be barred from taking second jobs, they should be barred from making any money from any source while they're an MP. Like, oh, you've got investments? Great. You're going to declare all of the money, all of that income, and we're going to tax you at a 100% rate. Everything you earn as an MP that's outside of that MP's salary, you're going to be taxed at 100%. You still keep your investments. When you stop being an MP, you can carry on getting that income. But while you're an MP, no income. All goes to the Treasury. Stop them earning anything at all. If they want to be an MP, they can do it for the basic salary and necessary expenses. But anyway, they obviously recognise that some level of public service is needed, but they only fund the bare minimum. For example, take the NHS. They go, oh, well, so you get winter NHS crises. Why? Because in winter you've got far more cases, more people become ill, for example. You have more injuries as well, maybe related to the cold. But nonetheless, you've got a higher caseload for the NHS. And the government go, well, we can't have staff to deal with that, because then in summer they'll be sitting around doing nothing. It's like, well, you could use that time for training. But that's not their attitude. Their attitude is, no, we'll staff it at the average level, right? We'll staff it at the average level, right? So, and bear in mind, this was a problem. Winter NHS crisis, it's not just now. They were under Thatcher and Major as well. This is Tory. This is just pure Tory. And what happens is then in winter, the cases go up, but you haven't got the staff to deal with them. So then they go longer without treatment. So it gets worse. So then it needs more resourcing. So you get a backlog. And you know, they're not being treated. The situation gets worse. It takes more resources to deal with it later, but they don't have the more resources. It's false economy. Another prime example was the pandemic response unit. We had a pandemic response unit. Marvellous, wasn't it? You know, when the government, right back to 2010, were identifying a global pandemic as the number one threat to the nation, we had a pandemic response team. Theresa May put it in mothballs, says, well, we don't need it right now. Put it in mothballs. And that is because the Tories' attitude to contingency planning is, well, why are we paying for this thing we might never need? So they work out ways of not spending the money. Oh, it'll probably never happen. Because that's the attitude of people from very privileged backgrounds who there's never any consequence in their life. When something goes wrong in their life, it's not actually a big deal for them. They can afford to just, oh, that was bad luck. You know, it's not like us. If something really bad happens in our life, it can be actually life-changing. Then, just months before the pandemic hit, Boris Johnson binned the unit altogether. And just to highlight this attitude of the Tories not spending on things which might not be needed, we still don't have a pandemic response unit even now. No one in government have thought to themselves, oh, that was a bit of false economy getting rid of that unit. That could have saved us a fortune. Should we put it back now for the next one? It's like, no, they're thinking, well, the next one will probably work for years. Leave it for Labour. This is exactly what happened with school buildings. It's the same thought process. They were told 5 years ago that these particular buildings had a weakness. They basically got to the end of their life. This is it. I mean, they were built generations ago, well before I was born. So they've lasted a long time, but they were now needing replacing. Because ministers couldn't be given you can almost imagine the minister say, well, when are they going to collapse? Well, I don't know. Is it going to be next year? Might be. Is it going to be 10 years' time? Might be. I don't know. We just need to replace them before that happens. Oh, no. So they took the attitude of leave it for later. It's not a problem right now. Are the buildings stood up right now? Yeah, we'll worry about it later then. Only when you have that attitude, and it's a very childish attitude as well. You're supposed to grow out of that attitude. But the reason I think you grow out of that attitude is because in life, for most of us, for normal people, if you don't deal with a problem in a timely manner in most people's normal lives, you suffer from it. So you learn that actually you need to deal with these issues early rather than later. But again, people from that sort of background don't learn that lesson because they don't. If they can deal with a problem and it'll cost them like £100 and they leave it till late and it costs £1,000, well, they've got so much money, even £1,000 not a big deal. So it's almost like procrastination's bred into them. You know, so when you have an attitude like that, what happens then, it transitions from being a relatively easy and cheap problem to fix to a much more difficult and expensive problem to fix. But the country isn't privileged. The country does suffer when they leave these problems. Because what needs to happen now is we now need special arrangements to be made for these students, which is going to mean a poorer quality education, but more costly. And the buildings are going to need replacing anyway. So we'll have the expense of replacing those buildings, plus the extra expense of not only trying to implement emergency plans, but the economic hit which now comes from pupils not getting the best education that they could. From a political point of view, I am just going to add it at the end as well. This should be ample opportunity for Bridget Phillipson. She's Labour's Shadow Education Secretary. She now has to make a name for herself. I have to say, and I've said this before, I have been disappointed with her. Ever since Starmer promoted her to the shadow cabinet, she was promoted as a rising star, along with Wes Streeting. Wes Streeting has made a name for himself, right? She has made no impact whatsoever. Now, if she cannot make a huge public issue out of this, when even the Tory client media have it on their front pages today, and it is affecting so many voters, she's really not up to the job. She should go back to a more junior position, learn the political arts a bit better, come back stronger in a few more years, if she's got that potential. Because this is an absolute outrage. 5 years the Tory knew that these buildings needed replacing. 5 years. The public need to be told that loudly and regularly. They were too busy arguing about how to maximise the damage to the country from Brexit and how best to divert public funds away from public services like schools and into their own bank accounts. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button if you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships, and until next time, I'll see you later.